started playing on the radio, and I thought to myself at that specific time in my life, I will never ever be beautiful again. The reason behind that was that I met a person, I invited him into my life. He was a station commander in the police, and I never knew that this guy's got a dark side. Nobody actually knew except for his family, but they decided to keep it quiet. So what happened is he wanted to move very fast. From the first cup of coffee that we drank at a coffee bar, everything moved very fast. It was love, it was presence, it was, I can't even explain that in words. At that stage in my life, I was at a very good space in my own personal life. I was a senior manager at a huge security company. I did extremely well for myself. I was completing my BCom degree part-time. He was everything. I was full package for him. And the things that he did in the beginning of the relationship was absolutely awesome. Maybe there was a voidness in my soul that somehow I thought that this person will fulfill my life. I would feel like a woman. So after 4 months, he wanted to move in. And my children, my daughter and my son invited him into our lives. My family invited him. And they made him part of the family right from the beginning. But somehow he always had excuses about me meeting his family. So after 4 months, he moved in. And in the beginning, I was so much in love with this man that there was sitting with a little bit of issues, but it's okay. I could really solve that with my love. So things started happening, strange things. You know, he got angry extremely. Really, if he would have got angry, it was really, really quick and very, very aggro. So I thought, you know, my love can cover this as well. As long as I can just bring him out and introduce Jesus to him, his heart will be softened, and then we will have a perfect relationship. As an empath, that's my personality, I feel for everybody. I love everybody and I forgive everybody. So this specific day, I'm not going to go into more detail. I want to share with you what happened to me. The day that I decided to take back my own life, to live again, to live out my hobbies, my work, everything. And he got jealous. He wanted to get engaged, quick. So I think we're 7 months into the relationship, he already bought the ring. And somehow I knew I made a mistake. Somewhere between the lines, the Holy Spirit was speaking to me. And this voice, I'm going to mention the voice, okay? But the voice I'm talking about is the Holy Spirit. So the Holy Spirit, or the voice, started saying to me gently, you know, do not let him move into your home. First of all, that was the first warning. And I said, God, listen now. I think you made a mistake. This person belongs with me. He's my dream man. He's my soulmate. God, please, just wait there, okay? I'll sort him out. I'll bring him to you eventually. So he joined my church. He was baptized. He was suddenly spirit-filled. And everything just to play the game, to be the perfect man. So in February of 2012, I was shot 6 months before Riva Steenkamp was shot and killed. So what happened is, in February, he arranged for us to go away for a romantic weekend. And he pulled out this huge ring, and I thought, wow, I got it. I've got it. I've got a wonderful man in my life. The moment that the ring was placed onto my finger, hell breaks loose. Behind closed doors. My family didn't know what was going on. Nobody knew what was really going on. And I still pray and I said to God, God, please change this man. Please, I will make a difference in his life. My love for him can solve anything. So after the engagement, a month later, it was the end of April. We got engaged middle of February. Things started changing a lot. He would phone my manager at work and tell him he would fix him or kill him if he walks into my office, or being friendly to me. He started doing very, very silly things. And I knew that after that I made a huge mistake of getting engaged with this person. So we went away. I booked a weekend away at Pilanesberg, a camp weekend. I'm a camper, and this guy hates the ground. So he went to Makro and he bought 7,000 Rand worth of camping gear. That's for us a two-man tent, huge tent for the children, my daughter and a friend, a two-man tent. You name it, it was in the trailer. And I even said to him, please, why? We can borrow the camping equipment. No, everything new. So after the weekend was okay, he did got furious a few times, but the Sunday, just after lunch, when we started packing up, I pulled out one pen of the big tent. I wanted to help him to put everything into a nice package again, and put it into the trailer and go home. And that was the person he was. He started screaming at me in front of all those people. That camp was extremely full. And he started screaming and telling me I got no idea how to think after Slani. And I said to him, you know what, I'm an old camper man, you don't know how to do this. And he got totally out of his mind. Now I must remember there's people there. He didn't even care what they were thinking. So what he did is he grabbed the equipment, the tents, everything, and he threw it into the trailer. And I stood there, my daughter and a friend were there, and I said to the Lord, Lord, I'm in trouble. I'm in serious trouble now. This guy's crazy. And he couldn't even close the lid of the trailer, so he took a rope, pulled it together, And then he said to me, get into the car. I said to him, there's no way. And he said to me, get into the car. And I said, Lord, I speak to the Lord like I've got a friend with me all the time. So I said to the Lord, Lord, I can't let my daughter, myself, and a friend get into this vehicle. It's going to be our last trip. Because he was totally out of his mind. Eventually, I had absolutely no one, I phoned around, no one could come and fetch us. So we got into the vehicle, and on the highway, he was driving at 200 kilometers per hour. He took my phone that was lying in the middle of us, and he tapped on my status. We finished. Now, my family's got no idea what's going on with this crazy guy. So, my mum was at home and she thought, what the heck is Enoch posting on his status? Meantime, it wasn't me. So, he grabbed my left hand and he ripped the ring from my finger. And the Holy Spirit said to me, keep quiet. If you don't say a word, hy van die kar rol. Dis hoe die Heilige Gees met my praat. En ek het stil gebly en hy het 'n fight gesoek. Hy wou met my beklei. And I kept quiet until we got home, and I chased him out of my life, out of my home, out of my life, and he didn't want to move out. And I was too ashamed to phone my family and say, listen, I need help. I've got two lovely brothers. And he moved into our, what do you call it, bediendenkamer? He moved into that part. But first of all, he came up to me and he said to me, I will destroy you. And I said to him, you know what? I'm done with you. I don't want you in my life. I'm not engaged to you anymore. I don't want you in my life. And he said to me, remember those words, I will destroy you. So, he moved his stuff. He didn't have a lot, so he moved it into the out room. And he came back into the house and he took out the safe. And in the safe was my 38 special and these 9 more. So he took out both of the weapons and he threw mine onto my bed. And he took the safe and his 9 more, and he went out. He slept there in the out room. So then the Holy Spirit started speaking to me daily, warning me that you are going to get hurt. My daughter, you are going to get hurt. And I said, Lord, I don't think you'll go that far. I don't think so, Lord. And he kept on saying to me, my daughter, your life is in danger. Your life is in danger. And I thought, okay, maybe he's going to leave me now, move out, or he never physically harmed me, only emotionally. So I thought, okay, Lord, what are you trying to say to me? And that's what I want to say to you. If the Holy Spirit speaks into your spirit, listen. It's not a sixth sense, Danny. That's not, if you're a child of God, it's not sixth sense voices. It's the Holy Spirit. He loves us and he warns us of danger. And so what happened is, he stayed there for a week and I tried to get him out, not involving my family, knowing he's got his 9 more with him. And my children and family, who didn't know about everything, actually begged me, take him back. He made a mistake. He feels sorry. Take him back. I made the biggest mistake of my life. I took him back into my home. I had absolutely no feeling for him, nothing. I just did it because my family and my children wanted him back. So, at the middle of June, he stayed in the outdoor rooms in May. So he moved back just before my birthday on the 18th of May. He moved back into my home. On the 11th of June, I was writing my final exam for my degree, and he knew that I am on my way to Australia, and he wanted to get married ASAP, and I said to him, no S. So what happened is, on the 24th of June, 2012, he walked into our home. I was just spending time with my daughter, and he knew it was the best time, because I was relaxed. I was chatting to my daughter. And he knew my mum was on the way because she stayed with me, so within an hour she would have been at home. His timing was perfect because it was premeditated murder. So he walked up to me with my daughter next to me, and he said to me, I want to talk to you. I was surprised because he didn't speak to me in 3 days, so maybe he wants to talk and move out. It's been the best thing that could ever happen. But he had other plans. He took my hand and he pulled me up from the couch, and he walked into our bedroom, and I followed him, and I thought, okay, let's talk privately. And he walked into our bathroom, and he turned around, and I was close to him, and he said to me, do you got anything to say to me? And I said to him, what do you mean? I thought you want to speak to me. He says, and he looked me in the eye and he said to me, you will never have your own free will again. And I stood there, I was so amazed. What the heck is going on with this crazy man again? But I never knew that he was planning my murder. So while I was standing in the bathroom still, I stood in the door, and I looked at this crazy man, and I thought, okay, Amy is on the next to, just behind that wall, my daughter. And he walked to right straight to the bedroom door, and he locked the door. And he took the key and put it into his small denim pocket. And while standing in the door, the Holy Spirit said to me, he's going to shoot you. And I said to him, Lord, it's impossible. It can't happen to me. It can't. I was fighting. And I saw him bending down, opening the cupboard, bending on it, went on his knees. And by that time, I went forward, and I jumped onto his back. And I begged him. I said, please, don't shoot me, please. I love you, please. And he said to me, I'll show you. And I fell onto the ground when he stood up with his weapon opened the safe. And he walked to the opposite of our bed, just on the other side. Our room were only 12 square meters. And he stood there, and I got onto my feet, and I was standing in the corner with the door right here, small room, and he's standing just opposite the bed where I was sleeping at night. And he started firing. He didn't stop. He fired. His first shot went through the right wall on my right hand side, just where the door were, or just on that side. And then he shot right to the left, and he started shooting me. I was shot twice through my right shoulder, 3 times through the left shoulder, And somehow I screamed out and I said, Jesus, save me. I don't want to die. Save me. And somehow I was still standing in the door when this guy, this monster, was actually standing right in front of me with his 9-ball and trying to kill me. So I moved forward while being shot. It's absolutely a miracle, because a bullet travels at 850 km per hour. I was strong, very strong. I walked towards him, and I could see in his face fear, devastating fear. He couldn't believe his eyes, because he just fired 6 bullets, but I'm still walking. And right next to him, he was only 1 meter away from me. I was shot through my right leg here. So I couldn't stand longer, and I went onto my knees. And I spoke to the Lord the whole time, because he was standing next to me. And I said, God, I don't want to die. And I went onto my knees. And while I was falling forward, or actually slipping forward, he shot me right through my breasts, both of them. And I was already on my knees, so I slipped, and I landed with my face, my left side of my face. I had the same type of flooring, very cold, and I was lying there, and my eyes were wide open. And I looked at the cupboard, and I knew he was there, just a meter away. And the next moment, I heard a noise, very, very loud, ugly noise. And I didn't know. He shot me twice in the head. The one bullet ripped my hand apart as my hand was lying under my head. On a distance from 1 meter, he was standing next to me, and he still shot me twice. So the one bullet went in behind my left ear and ripped my whole face away. I lost my mandible, which is your lower jaw. I lost all my teeth. And the other bullet went right here at the back of my head, and it slipped onto my skull, and it ripped my hair, burnt my hair away permanently. Still don't grow it up until today. Now, let me share miracles. While I was lying there, my eyes wide open, the Holy Spirit said to me, loud, my daughter, you're not going to die. And I said to him, but Lord, look at all the blood. My head was lying here, and because of the bullet that went here, right in at the back of my left ear, missed my main vein with 1 mil, went straight through, ripped my tongue away at the back, and took everything with. So I was bleeding through my tongue heavily. So I was lying there, and I looked at this cupboard, and the pool of blood just became bigger and bigger, and I could smell my own blood. And I wanted to move my right hand, and I just wanted to see if I'm still alive, because I don't know if I was alive. And I wanted to move my finger, and the Holy Spirit said to me, don't move. He's looking at you. Don't move. And I really wanted wanted to move, just to check if I'm still okay, if I'm still alive. And a force came onto my body and pressed me onto this cold floor. I couldn't move. I couldn't even breathe. I couldn't. I was literally stuck onto the floor. And at that moment, I knew I'm not going to die. I was 100% sure I'm not going to die, even if it looked like I'm done. So, when the Holy Spirit said to me, He's looking at you, I knew He was looking at me. I didn't see because my face was turned away from Him. But the Holy Spirit is truthful. And I believed what He was saying to me. I didn't try to turn my head and see if He's still there. I didn't care. Because that verse that says, where it says that you've got this vrede, but alle verstand te boven gaan. Surprising, you know that feeling. Knowing that I'm seriously hurt, I was still not afraid at that moment. And then a shot went off. And I didn't even care if it was meant for me anymore. He shot himself next to me and he killed himself with one bullet. So I was lying in my own blood, pool of blood. 4.11 liters of blood I lost on the floor. Only in my body there's an estimate about 5 liters. So I was blood drained, totally. I was full of bullets, my face was gone. I had serious head injuries. I didn't lost. I was still conscious all the time. And I could hear the Holy Spirit speaking to me. And He said to me, come up, my daughter, come up as soon as you can, come up. And I said to Him, Lord, I can't. I've got no power, I'm weak. And He said to me, my daughter, come up. Come up. And I tried with my left hand, and while pushing in my own blood, tried to push myself up. I looked at my left hand, and my left hand was blown away. And I looked and I slipped back into the pool of blood. But everything was a daze. And while lying there, the Holy Spirit kept on telling me, my daughter, come up, quickly, come up. At that moment, I didn't know that my mandible was blown away and I was actually slipped to my eie tande. It was going down my throat, so I was busy suffocating, yeah. And that's why He wanted me to get up. So somehow, I can't explain this to you, I took my right hand and I pushed myself up. And I was in a sitting position. And I had no idea how am I going to get out of that room or if I'm going to live. Because I don't know how many bullets went through my body or is still stuck into my body. And the wonderful thing is, the Holy Spirit spoke to me the whole time. He never left my side. So while sitting there in my barn, I was just looking around and I looked back and I saw him. Where he was sitting in a sitting position. He must have sat down before he shot himself. So I looked at him and I looked at the weapon and I said, Lord, what just happened here? And you know what? I could feel the darkness in the room. I could feel it. It was so strong. I could smell it and I could feel it. So while sitting there, for the first time I heard my daughter saying to me, Mommy, Mommy, are you alive? Mommy, answer me. Remember, she's on the other side of the door. She doesn't even know. She knew all the bullets that went off. He fired 14 bullets at me. 9 of them went through my body. So Amy was on the other side, and I couldn't speak to my own daughter. I couldn't tell her that I'm alive. And I didn't know the reason behind the heavy feeling in my face. I had no pain at that stage, nothing. And the Holy Spirit said to me, tell Amy to call her dad and to call the neighbor to open the door. That was a direct instruction from the Holy Spirit. So in my mind, I spoke to Amy. And I said, in my mind, I repeated what the Holy Spirit said to me. And Amy has testified with me. She doesn't want to be on the platforms at all. She said to me, Mommy, your voice came out of the room and you said to me, call your dad and get the neighbor to open the door. So she acted immediately. Called my ex. My ex was on his way for a Sunday drive on his bike, and somehow the helmet was half already actually on, and he took it off and he answered the phone. He phoned 01111 and they answered immediately. That is a miracle. So by then they've already notified all the police stations in the area, and he was on his way to my place, my ex. And the neighbor, who's deaf, he couldn't hear any of the shots. Like with your place, the bedroom wall is next to his lounge. He didn't hear one single shot. So Amy grabbed him through the trailer door and she said, Kom. And she said, Kom. En toe hy inkom, het hy nie 'n idee gehad wat verwag nie. Hy het 3 keer probeer. He tried 3 times to knock the door open, and eventually he did. He's a huge guy. And he actually tripped over me, and he got onto his feet and he stood there, totally shocked, seeing him sitting next to the whatever skoolkas, and me, only blood, no face. So Amy got strength, and she was only 13 years old. So she said to me, when she saw that I was still alive, she said to me, Mommy, I know I had to get you to hospital, but I've got no idea how to do that. So that's where God comes in. What happened is that Amy tried to pull, she shifted me to the door, okay, so I was still on my bum, and she said, Mommy, I showed her there's something in my leg, but I didn't know my face was gone. I knew there was something in my leg, and she said, okay, and the blood was just, she just spit out of my tongue. So she, as a spirit-filled 13-year-old, there was one space, she said, at the back of my shoulder, where she put her hand and she said, Jesus, help me. And the blood stopped. So the next moment, I was totally conscious all the time. So the next moment, I was at my car. I don't know. Amy didn't carry me. The neighbor was still standing there when the police arrived. So I still remember the last time that I was in the house was at my own bedroom door. And the next moment, Amy and I was at my car, at my vehicle. And she opened the passenger door and she said, "Mommy, get in." And I pulled myself. I had strength in my body, you will not believe. I got myself into the passenger seat and she ran to the driving side and she said, "Mommy, show me how to drive this car, Mommy, don't die. Tell me how to drive the car." And I looked at her and I knew, I'm busy dying. Because one moment I was extremely hot and the next moment I was cold and I knew I was dying. And my daughter had no idea to drive a car. So, this is how God operates. He always works with a plan. Why in the world would I have said to Amy, "Call your ex," my ex? I don't even speak to him, okay? But the Lord has already prepared him for a call. And he was the right person to get the call, especially on a Sunday afternoon. So while 111 found all the police stations, right in front of our complex, a young constable, only 4 months in the police service, heard the news on the radio, and he looked to the side and he saw, "Halali, this is the complex where the shooting just took place." And he came into the gate and both gates, security gates, opened up for him. And Amy jumped out of the car and she grabbed this poor guy and she pulled him out of the vehicle, and he was in such a shock, and she said to him, "Ray, go, my mummy's dying. She's been shot. Ray." And you know what? That guy didn't even think this. He got into my car and he drove me to Montana Hospital. 7 minutes. And that's where more miracles started happening. I was in a coma for 9 days. While being in a coma, I went into a dark place. It's a place that is pitch dark and it's ice cold. And I'm not talking about winter cold, I'm talking about godsverlate. And how did I know that? Because my soul screamed out to me, God is not here. I knew my soul, my spirit said to me, God is not here. And I wanted to speak to the Holy Spirit like I used to. And it was quiet. He didn't answer me. And I was extremely fearful. And I knew somehow there's a big hole in front of me, but it's pitch dark. You can't see nothing. It's just scary, extremely scary. So somehow I knew there was a big hole in front of me. And I knew if I would have moved just a little bit, you are aware of every single thing while you're in that place. So I said to myself, don't move forward. Stay still. And there was a scream, like a voice that said to me, move, go, move forward, go. was a scary voice. And I called unto Jesus, and I said to him, Jesus, save me, please, save me. I need your grace, save me. And the next moment, I was in Psalm 23, in the valleys, with Jesus holding my hand, and we walked onto this awesome, into this valley. And there were shepherds and sheep and peace. He never said to me, go back and tell everybody about me. It's my choice. So, after 9 days I woke up in ICU in Montana Hospital. I was in a glass room. And I didn't know what the heck, what was going on. I was totally confused. And then a doctor was seated next to me and he waited for me to wake up. I don't know how long he waited, but in any case. So he said to me, I need to ask you 2 things. I said, okay. But I wanted to talk to him, but I couldn't. I had a trachea, or trach, whatever you call it in English. They had to make a hole into my throat to enable me to breathe. So this thick pipe was in my throat. I was pipes that were feeding me, and heart machines and stuff. So I am a living miracle. So, jy moet just staan hier nie, jy moet my sê wanneer ek bestarig, want ek kan ure praat. Dit was my die grootste skok gewees. When I woke up in this glass room, knowing what happened to me, and this doctor or this psychologist wanted to ask me 2 questions. Do you know what happened to you? And I'm not just nod my head. And he said to me, do you want him to be dead or alive? And I took my hand, my right hand, this one was extremely bad. So I took my hand and I wrote in the air, D-O-O-D, dead, do it. I want him dead. So that's my road. Well, after that, I had many battles to fight. Many. I was without a mandible. I couldn't eat. I couldn't speak. Because of the damage to my tongue, I couldn't pronounce words. I was severely hurt. Not only physically, he hurt me emotionally and spiritually. But one thing that I know, through all the 27 odd operations that I had to go through, to reconstruct my face, my hands, and everything that was, the next day they removed 4 bullets out of my body that got stuck. So, even the doctors said they've never ever seen something like this. After arriving at the hospital that afternoon, they had a maxillofacial surgeon coming through. They fixed, or they put your head together again. So he came in, a wonderful Indian doctor. And I love him to bits still today. They were fighting for my life for 6 hours. They lost me twice. And they came out, that same doctor came out late that night, after 11 o'clock, saying to my mum, here's her clothes. You must pray to your God. She's not going to make the next half an hour. She's strong. She's fighting, We're just not going to make it. And my mum said to him, you don't know my God. So there was no hope, medically no hope. And everybody started, people came from all over, and they started making circles around the hospital praying for me while they were fighting for my life. So everything was, it was really terrible for me to know that somebody that I loved, somebody that I trusted, did that to me. Somebody that I actually offered my soul to him, and he raped my soul. Because he believed that I must be submitted all the time. So the moment that I stood up for myself for the first time, I became his enemy. And he even went that far to try and murder me or kill me. So people always say, how far? How far will a man go? How far will a woman go? You don't know. You never know a person. You'll never know how far they will go. I just want to give it took 3 months. I was without a mandible for 3 months. I was living on insure and soup. Because I couldn't swallow properly, I couldn't eat. I had no teeth, I had no lower mandible. So Dr. Mutray, the maxillofacial surgeon, said to me, Mrs. Parker, I can't operate on you. You need to put up weight. And I said, Doctor, maar hoe? Ek kan nie eet nie. Only liquids. And he said to me, I don't know what you're going to do. You need to put up at least 7 kilograms for me to enable to do an 8-hour operation on you for the reconstruction. So the day that he eventually scheduled the day, it took him 3 months to prepare for that operation. It was the first successful mandible operation in South Africa. So I've got a titanium plate from here right through, and it ends here. This was ripped away. Everything was ripped away. So the reconstruction of a mandible is not something very, very easy to do because of the jaw, like a hyena. You know how strong a hyena's jaw is, and the human being has got the same type of jaw. So he had to line up that titanium plate with no 1 millimeter offset. Otherwise, I would have been going like this. You know what I mean? But this person, this wonderful doctor is a Hindu, okay? So I speak in front of, when I went to visit him, I said, my Jesus will do this, my God will do that, my Jesus will do this. And he was like, okay. You know? So eventually, early that morning went into Waterfall City. That's where he is, his practice, and I went there for the operation, the reconstruction, and he came up to me and he said to me, "You trusting me for the 2nd time with your life?" I said to him, "No. I could die. I could definitely die today because of the huge, the time it takes 8.5 hours. I was very, very thin. And of the anesthesia, wat hulle vir jou gee, jou liggaam, jou hart gaan staan as ek goed is. Hy het nou by my kom staan en sê, ek sal mooi na jou kyk. Toe sê ek van dokter, my Jesus sal mooi na my kyk. So, die kakebeen is toe ingesit. Ek het 'n titanium plate in my mouth. So now, I still got no teeth. So how do you place teeth onto a steel plate? So I had to wait 6 weeks that I put my mouth together again to keep it very, very still. So after 6 weeks, I had to go and see him again. And we prayed for that 6 weeks. Everybody that I knew, up until Australia, people in Australia, over the whole of South Africa, prayed for me, for a miracle. Because if there was if that operation was not a success, it would have taken more than a year or two for him to redo that operation. So I just want to go back. When I wake up in ICU, I say to the Lord, Lord, if you give me back my mouth, I will glorify your name until the day that I really die. So I challenged God. I did. I'm that type of person, you know. I believe you have to challenge people. And I challenged God. I said, give me back my mouth. And there was no way at that stage. No hope. So I had a facelift on this side. So I had to pull the remaining fell back, right up there. I was cut open up until here. So yes, the extraction operation went well, but still no teeth. And I wanted to go back to work, and I couldn't speak to customers because I had no teeth. So after the 6 weeks, we went back. And you know what? The miracle God intervened again. While I was putting into this rotating scan thing, that showed onto his computer how my mouth looks like, the reconstruction. He started crying. And he said to me, Mrs. Barker, I've never ever seen something like this before my whole life. You've got a gum. I can actually put teeth into your gum. This soft tissue that grow onto the plate. Yeah. So 5 implants was fitted into my mouth, and I've got a 9 teeth line onto those 5 implants. So my life is still a challenge. Every day I went through a lot of operations. I just want to share this with you. I went for this 1 hand operation again. I went for 8 hand operations. And I asked, I asked her, please, just give me something for pain before we go into theatre, They were delaying because there was an emergency. And I said, just give me something for pain. And she OD'd me. I died before going into theatre. So, when I woke up, let me just share this with you. Actually, my spirit left my body. I was hovering right on over my own body. I could see the nurse sitting on the right-hand side and somebody trying to resuscitate it, whatever my So there's a person, a man, a male was on the left-hand side and this woman was on the right-hand side. I could see myself from up there and I couldn't get into my body. I know that must be the feeling when you really die, because I called unto Jesus and somehow it's like a vacuum machine that, and I went into my body. And this woman stood up and she started screaming, she's alive, she's alive. So she said to me, you know what, Mrs. Parker, we lost you. And she was a nervous wreck. And I said to her, I'm back. I really wish I would have gone, but I'm still here. So I can tell you a lot of things that I went through. It's been 12 years. And the Lord has given me a new vision for women of South Africa. It's time for us to rise up for Jesus and make Him our number one in our lives.